Well, as a cultural critic, I'm really interested in the ways in which ideas and experiences from the margins of the West, let's say, have kind of kept certain traditions alive and have gone on to then influence the mainstream, if you will, and the sort of weird relationship we have between media and technology and these underground streams that really go back centuries, really, in terms of mysticism and alternative living. And it's always struck me as very interesting when there's space inside the larger culture to recognize certain things that are very intense and very outside of, very marginal. For example, DMT was around in the 60s. A lot of heads took DMT in the 60s. But DMT didn't really register in the 60s. That if you read accounts, if you try to get a sense of the way in which the 60s became this sort of, moving psychedelic culture that went on to have extraordinary influence on film, on music, et cetera, that DMT itself, the DMT flash, didn't quite register the way that LSD did. And to my mind, I think it's partly because that larger culture just didn't know how to deal with it, didn't know a language, couldn't find a metaphor for it. So that even though individuals were having those experiences and were clearly, spilling them into their work if they were artists or writers or thinkers, that the larger culture didn't really quite register it. This wasn't the case in, let's say, the early 90s or the late 80s. And I don't think that's an accident. I don't think it's an accident because I think that the maps and models that come out of a hyper sped up media culture with a technological culture that is increasingly interested and open to kind of density of data, a kind of idea of spatializing wide ranges of information, of navigating through spaces of data, that those kinds of metaphors created a space where DMT could paradoxically have even more influence, even if there weren't that many people who were actually taking it. That it became, there was now a kind of zone for people to ride it. So, my own work, that's very interesting to me because it seems to be an example of the way in which the larger media culture, the larger technological culture, is once again influenced by these much more marginal and intense and unusual experiences that happen kind of at the edge of culture. So much so now that I suspect that a lot of people, and well, not even suspect, I know that a lot of people describe or attempt to map the particular and peculiar space that seems to be opened up with DMT, this kind of hyper-geometrical, data-dense, quasi-linguistic, extremely rapid environment using metaphors drawn from the internet, from virtual reality, from high technology, and even the kind of color signature of these spaces, this kind of hyper-real, excessive, almost cartoony kind of color scheme seems to resonate with a certain sort of garish excess that we have inside of media culture. So much so that it almost seems sometimes as if DMT is representing a kind of limit case or an end point in what happens when you create a denser and denser and more self-referential media scheme. So that what I'm saying really is that our ability to come away from the flash with actual content, with substance, with images, with maps, with concepts, with experiences, is partly based on the way in which those things feed into our growing allegorical realm of media and technology. So I think those things are really deeply coupled, and it's something that I've been looking at for quite a long time.